Hi, I'm Chris Brown, professor at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and this is the fifth module in the second part of a course on axiomatic design and manufacturing processes, and we're in the portion on intermediate axiomatic design, and we're looking at CNs, customer needs, and the requirements process. Now, the content of this is taken from another article that Professor Thompson did in 2013. This was at the CIRP, the International Institution for Production Engineering Research, and that was presented at the General Assembly. And this is Improving the Requirements Process and Axiomatic Design Theory. And so what she's doing is integrating some of the more traditional requirements processes into axiomatic design and providing some method and structure for the requirements process. And again, we're looking at a classification system. So note, this is a kind of reoccurring theme. In order to make some kind of technical progress here, one of the things that we're doing is relying on classification systems so that we can see commonalities and be able to know how to treat these things, and to ensure, in this case, that all the requirements information is included. In other words, it's collectively exhaustive. So another repeating theme in the design. It's important to make sure that we don't leave anything out. So she's introducing this term here, stakeholder, as opposed to just customer. So this has got a broader sense to it. And then she has a table that she uses that's in the paper, and I recommend reading the paper to visualize the mapping between the stakeholders and their requirements. So the objectives: identification of CNs in the customer domain, and then mapping the functional requirements and the constraints in the functional domain, mapping to these. All right, so some cautions, and this is, we're going to take a look then at the CNs. So mistakes in the CNs, if we don't get them right, can lead to incomplete, excessive, or changing FRs, which in turn can lead to unacceptable design solutions, unnecessarily complex design solutions, non-productive iterations, and the inability to select the best design solution early in the design process. Mixing up CNs, FRs, and Cs with DPs and PVs can introduce some personal bias and forestall creative thinking. So this is part of the, for example, solution neutral environment issue. So some errors, that should be common errors in the requirements process. And they are due to failure to identify or include all of the key stakeholders, inappropriate emphasis or exclusion of one or more class of stakeholders, and inappropriate emphasis on or exclusion of one or more type of requirements. So requirements, 4 basic steps. 1, identify the key stakeholders, perform background and stakeholder research, identify the stakeholder needs, and define requirements / design specifications. Stakeholder needs. So what we get for stakeholder needs logically is going to be influenced by our choice of the stakeholders. Stakeholders should be explicitly identified and categorized separately from their needs, and then a who to what map between the stakeholders and the customer domain. So we're backing up. So we've got now this sort of stakeholder domain and the customer domain and the functional domain. All right. So some of the CNs are related to important selection and optimization criteria that we've already talked about in the previous module. And they often contain important requirements that are not functional in nature. They're qualities, figures of merit, are the terms used in some of the other design literature. So these would be smooth, light, robust, easy to use. And so failure to acknowledge these categories can lead designers to, one, classify all of the requirements information as FRs, even if much of it is non-functional in nature. So then we don't have the minimum list of FRs, and this won't be good to design from. So it's either that or disrupts the mapping from the FRs to the DPs later in the design process, and interferes with applying the design axioms. Or the other thing that it can do is cause us to discard all the non-functional types of requirements information, and this results in incomplete specifications and design failures. So we want to avoid both of these types of problems. So consider the non-functional requirements, Cs, SCs, and OCs, and other types of requirements. So it's important we do that and consider those. And so we have a slightly modified view then of the axiomatic design process. So stakeholder identification and classification. So we've got perhaps 3 different people in the customer, client, and user. So this needs to establish the value in the design solution. So also we have the design, manufacturing, supply chain, and life cycle management. These are also stakeholders, and their needs and so things like manufacturability and timing on the supply chain. What do we do with the product at the end of its life? How is it disposed of? How is it recycled? So these are all important things to have considered in the design. Now there are some external influences. These are people not directly affected, but government, society, the environment. So, for example, the development of products with inadequate disposal and things that are environmentally unsound. And so these have led to new government regulations. And so restricting the use of certain chemical substances, and encouraging the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and requiring the recycling of consumer products. So this influences the strategic development of new products and services. So these are important societal things. We need things that are environmentally sound. And so we might say that these are just ethical. So engineering ethics, the number one, the top canon, is to hold paramount safety, health, and welfare of the public. It's not until we get to number 4 that it's act for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees, and the ones in between talk about working in your area of expertise, and also what to do in the case of conflict. But as an engineer, our first job is, first responsibility is to the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Thank you for your attention.